Salutations, everypup, and welcome to Chapter 41 of the one they call Broccoli by Texiliaz. As always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 41 Catnapped. Chapter Summary. Izuku meets someone from his past, and finally gets some answers. Author's notes. Hello, everyone. This is a bit of a longer chapter, which is why it took a while to finish. I really hope you will enjoy this one. Trigger warning. Panic attacks. Manipulation. Shota's point of view. Shota was currently feeling devastated. There was no other way to describe it. 2 of his students had been kidnapped, and several others were injured or unconscious, or both. And to make matters worse, once Shota got home a moment to breathe, he headed into the student's room, and what he found there only confirmed his earlier fear. Laying in one of the futons was seemingly Midoriya, and for a small moment, relief flooded Shota. But upon closer inspection, it was just a bunch of fluffed up pillows and a wig that was eerily similar to his student's own hair. And what was even worse was the fact that Midoriya's phone was right there beneath the pillow, playing snoring sounds as if to mock him. So much for tracking down the kid's phone. That was their current situation. 2 missing children, one of them also being Shota's cat, and they had absolutely no idea where they were or how to get them back home. How the hell was Shota supposed to explain all this to Toshinori? Broccoli's point of view. Broccoli had been sleeping peacefully before he woke up slowly to the feeling of hands running through his fur. He was leaning into the touch, purring sleepily as he tried falling back asleep. He wasn't at all worried, knowing that it was probably one of his dads, who had come to check on him. Besides, he was feeling warm and safe, not to mention comfortable, and he just wanted to sleep. Someone was humming a familiar melody, one he hadn't heard in a very long time. The melody felt oddly nostalgic, but Izuku couldn't quite put his finger on why or where he might have heard it before. When sleeping failed him, Broccoli instead decided to wake up and he struggled to raise his head, yawning as he did. Broccoli finally opened his eyes and looked around. He found himself in a dark room. He was lying in someone's lap while they pet him, but when he looked up, he couldn't see their face, only darkness. Or wait, was that a mask? Broccoli squinted his eyes, his vision being awfully blurry for some reason. But yes, that was definitely a mask and not someone's face, which meant that someone wearing a dark mask was holding him. Immediately, alarm bells started blaring in Broccoli's head as he realized he didn't know this person. But strangely enough, no danger sense, which probably meant whoever this was didn't plan to hurt him. Yet. "So, you're finally awake," the person said, his voice low and soothing as he continued to run his big hand down Broccoli's now stiff back. Broccoli jumped at the voice. It sounded different, muffled by the mask, but also so achingly familiar. But no, it couldn't be, right? He stared up at the person in the mask, not making a move. Then he heard a painfully familiar chuckle. "Ha ha ha ha! Hello, Izuku," the person, his father, said with clear fondness in his voice. All at once, Izuku felt his whole world fall apart as memories of last night came rushing back. The League attacked their camp, him getting kidnapped, and Kachan. Oh no, where was Kachan? Did they get him too? Or was Izuku the only one captured? Fear started creeping in, and he looked up at the man, his father, Hisashi Midoriya, in confusion. Where was he? Why was his father here? What happened to the others? Is his father being held a prisoner by the villains? Is that why he never came home? "I see you are confused," the man hummed, still petting him and making Broccoli involuntarily relax, both from the feeling of being pet and the sound of his soothing voice. It was now he noticed how he was feeling groggy and weird, like he had that one time Midnight had given him catnip, or after he got injured and would get strong painkillers. Had he been given something while he was asleep? His front paw hurt like hell, and he looked down at it, frowning at the mangled limb and patches of hairless and clearly bruised skin. He looked back up at the man and gave a small meow, only to wince at the action. His throat felt raw, and the more he thought about it, the more awful he felt. Not having a recovery girl there to immediately heal his injuries really sucked.
Ah, yes. Sorry about that, little one. I tried to let my doctor look at you, but with you in your cat form, there wasn't much he could do, other than give you something for the pain,
He said before tilting his head as if considering something.
If I let you down, will you promise to behave and not run away? I really don't want to see you get hurt.
Broccoli frowned at that, wondering who this doctor was. He then nodded, letting the man put him down on the floor. He winced as his paws hit the cold concrete floor and had to lift his injured paw to relieve some of the pain. As soon as he was feeling steady enough, Izuku transformed into his human form, leaving him in the same shorts he had worn during the fight. His shirt and shoes had sadly been destroyed, leaving him feeling naked and vulnerable. Dad? Izuku asked, shakingly. Is. is that really you?
The man just chuckled again. Yes, Izuku, it's really me,
His dad confirmed with a nod.
and just look at you. You've grown so much.
The man gushed, reaching out to run a hand through Izuku's unruly curls. Izuku froze, feeling very conflicted. On one hand, he was happy to see his father again, but on the other hand, all of this was just so weird. So many years, so many sleepless nights where he would dream of the day his dad returned home, dreams where he would come back and save Izuku from his mother. But he had stopped having those dreams years ago. He was feeling dizzy. He couldn't help but lean into the touch as tears welled up in his eyes. Dad, I.
Izuku, can you hear us? You need to run, now!
The sound of the vestiges crying out startled Izuku out of his daze. How long have they been trying to reach him? Why hadn't he heard them before? And why did they sound so scared? He could feel One For All pulsating through his veins, but with whatever drug he had been given, it felt weaker than normal, almost distant and hard to reach. But now that he listened carefully, he could hear all of the vestiges talking over each other, seemingly terrified for some unknown reason.
Izuku, are you all right, son?
His dad asked him gently, moving his hand to instead settle at his shoulders to steady him. Meanwhile, the vestiges continued talking frantically.
Kid, listen, that is not who you think it is. That is All For One.
At that, Izuku froze, feeling like his veins had turned to literal ice. What? You. Izuku wheezed out, feeling dizzy. You were All For One? He asked faintly before he could stop himself. The man, villain, sighed and withdrew his hand, instead settling them in his lap.
I see that All Might have already told you about his side of the story. I guess that was expected since he gave you his quirk.
The man spoke sadly, shaking his head. Wait, what? Hold on. Seriously? You know about One For All? Izuku asked, unable to believe what he was hearing. But still, that doesn't. Are you actually one All For One? And why do you sound like my. What kind of sick joke is this? Who are you? He cried out, clutching at his now hurting head. All of this was just too much. The man shook his head again.
It's not a joke, Izuku. If anything, imagine my surprise when, of all people, that fool chose my son as the next successor to my brother's quirk.
He gritted out, sounding genuinely displeased with it all.
And after I went through all the trouble of giving you a non-combat quirk so you wouldn't be able to play hero. It really was a shame.
That had Izuku pause, all thoughts coming to a screeching halt as he stared at the man in utter disbelief. You gave me a quirk? Izuku asked faintly, voice shaking.
Hmm? Oh, yes, the cat transformation one. I took it from a man who didn't want it because of its inconvenience. You wanted a quirk so bad, back when you were little. But I couldn't risk giving you one that you could use as a hero. He said, the word hero being spoken with utter disgust. I figured a cute cat quirk with an inconvenient time limit would be perfect, the man continued, sounding almost proud of himself. Izuku's mind was reeling as he listened to his father speak about his quirk, a quirk that had apparently been taken from someone else so nonchalantly, and all while sounding so proud, as if he'd done Izuku a huge favor. Unfortunately, the man continued, the quirk never seemed to manifest. I waited and waited, but nothing happened. Then I tried to take it back so I could give you a new one, but for some reason it didn't work, and I couldn't give you another quirk, not without risking you turning into. Anyway, I figured you'd be fine even without a quirk, he said, shaking his head.
You you figured I'd be fine?
Hmm? Well, no. I'm aware of how the quirkless of your generation are treated, of course, and I was worried after I had to leave due to my injury. That's why I made sure to send your mother money regularly so you never would be without. But I never stopped missing you or your mother. He then paused before asking more softly, Speaking of Inko, how is she? Izuku felt like he was going to throw up, and he suddenly collapsed to the floor, kneeling. His legs just wouldn't work, and he felt absolutely sick to his stomach as his head spun. All for One immediately got down to one knee and laid a hand on his shoulder, asking if he was all right, but Izuku just flinched back. Izuku, what's wrong? Did did something happen to your mother?
The villain asked, sounding genuinely worried for some reason. Inko is... She was not... He tried to speak, shaking his head. Why would you just leave me with her? The man was quiet for a small moment, before he sighed sadly.
I'm sorry about leaving you two. I never wanted to do that. But if you knew the gravity of what All Might did to me, and the extent of my injuries, you'd understand why I couldn't go back. That's why I wear this mask.
No, I mean, why would you leave me with her? Izuku cried out, tears welling up in his eyes. She was an awful mother, and you just left me with her!
Izuku, the man breathed out in disbelief. Inko is a good woman, and the best mother I know. How could you call her awful? She always loved you more than its life itself, he said, sounding like he genuinely believed it.
She only loved me while you were still around, Izuku told him, tears now freely running down his face. Then she blamed me for you leaving us. She wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't feed me, wouldn't even look at me. I had no one to take care of me for years after you were gone. There was a heavy silence as the two just looked at each other, Izuku's vision being blurry from his tears. Then, All for One took in a shaking breath and laid a hand on Izuku's shoulder, as if to steady himself.
She what?
He asked, anger clear in his voice as he tightened his grip on his shoulder. You really didn't know? Izuku asked uncertainly.
The man shook his head. No, Izuku, I never would have. If I'd known, I would have taken you with me. I just thought leaving you was the right thing to do. Last time I tried too hard to keep someone dear to me close, and it didn't work out so well. So I thought it was better if I kept my distance, for your sake.
They sat in silence for a while, the man's words hanging heavily over them as they both took this in. It was extremely uncomfortable.
I'll make it up to you, the man said firmly, nodding to himself. From now on, I'm never letting you go again. Don't worry about Inko. I'll take care of her.
What are you gonna do?
Izuku asked, suddenly terrified for both himself and his mother. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. The man brushed him off. Now, let's get you to the doctor so he can take a look at those injuries. Wait, no! I'm not going anywhere with you! Especially not to see some shady doctor! Izuku cried out, trying to get away, but the man's grip only tightened. I see. I'm sorry about this, All For One said, before a mist erupted from his hand and Izuku was promptly put to sleep. The last thing Izuku could hear was the vestiges crying out in his mind. Hisashi, All For One's, point of view. Hisashi wasn't sure what he was supposed to think, after learning about Inko's apparent neglect. There had been no signs of anything of that sort back when he had been around. If he had known that's how things would turn out, he never would have left Izuku with her. But he also didn't want to be too quick to judge. He'd been determined to stay out of their lives, but this was something he couldn't ignore. He loved Inko dearly, but he loved his son even more. And if she had so much as hurt a hair on his boy's head, there would be dire consequences. So he would look into it. Once Izuku was healed and safely put in his room, he'd investigate this properly. Then he could make a fair judgment on what to do with her. That decided, Hisashi nodded to himself and carried his son towards the doctor's office. He trusted the doctor to fix his arm, without any funny business. The man knew better than to try anything with what was considered his. He watched as the doctor operated on Izuku's arm, carefully aligning the broken bones before stitching it all up together. Then, once everything was aligned properly, Hisashi used one of his many healing quirks on the boy. It wasn't anything strong, not like the one Recovery Girl had. Oh, how he wanted to get his hands on that quirk. But the one he had at least speeds up the healing process a little, and would mean the boy wouldn't need to use a cast. Once that was done, Hisashi gently carried his son to the boy's room and laid him down on the neatly made bed before tucking him in beneath the blanket. This room had been ready and waiting, sort of like a backup plan, in case he ever had to take his son in. It was designed to look like the one he had back home, minus the window, so hopefully the kid would feel at home here. He'd been reluctant to the idea, after what happened with Yoichi. He didn't want to smother his son and have him hate him as well. Now, though, things were different. Especially now that Izuku had gotten into UA, of all places. He couldn't afford to let his son run free any longer and risk getting killed while playing hero. Before leaving, he leaned down and ran his hands through his boy's hair, smiling as the kid leaned into the touch, as if even in his sleep he knew he was his. Don't worry, Izuku. I am here now.
Izuku's point of view. Izuku woke up with a gasp, only to flinch as his everything hurt. Something had woken him up, but he was unsure what exactly. All he knew was that he was filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. He frantically looked around, only to feel his stomach drop as he realized he was back at his mother's place. How did he get here? Wasn't he just... Wait, where was he supposed to be right now? Izuku was suddenly distracted from his spiraling thoughts by another wave of panic flooding through him. Only, it wasn't coming from him? Focusing on the vestiges, he could hear them talking frantically between each other, and they seemed to be trying to calm down Yoichi. Was that where the panic was coming from?
I can't do this! Not again!
The man sobbed, sounding distraught.
Yoichi, it's gonna be fine.
Second tried to soothe him, only to get cut off.
Nothing about this is fine! He's gonna keep us here forever and... No, listen, this is not like before. Third told him sternly. The heroes are looking for the kid as we speak, and they will come rescue us. We're gonna be okay. Izuku said out loud, causing all the voices to quiet down and focus on him. Are you guys okay? There was a murmur of whispers before the connection got weaker and the panic eased. Izuku wondered how stressed out the vestiges must have been, for them not to notice how much of that had flooded over to him. They usually were so good at keeping their secrets. It's not great, kiddo.
Nana answered gently, materializing in the room and sitting down on the edge of his bed. Yoichi is pretty stressed out over this whole situation. It suddenly clicked in Izuku's mind what she meant. After all, he knew of Yoichi's backstory with his brother and how he'd been trapped for ages by the man. He's triggered, Izuku whispered, feeling extremely guilty for getting into this mess. Sorry. Don't apologize, Nana chided. None of this is your fault, all right? But No. No blaming yourself for getting caught. You did everything you could, she told him sternly. Okay, Izuku agreed reluctantly. But will Yoichi be alright? Nana paused before letting out a sigh. He will be. Second and third are looking after him as we speak. Let's just give them some space for now, okay? Izuku gave a hesitant nod before his gaze traveled across the room. It really did look just like his childhood bedroom, with identical walls and furniture. But upon closer inspection, it also was nothing like his room back home. For one, the window was fake, with what looked like a painting of a sunny landscape in place of actual glass. Then there was the fact that his door was a freaking valve door. So, yeah, not exactly how he remembered his childhood bedroom to look like. Can we get out using one for all? Izuku asked her, studying the walls. I'm afraid not. The walls are several meters thick. We tried to phase through them, but couldn't reach the other end. Same with roof and floor. Wherever we are, we're somewhere deep down, and we have no idea what would happen if we blasted a hole somewhere. That made Izuku swallow anxiously. So they couldn't blast their way out of here. Not that Izuku was sure how he could have done that anyway, considering his injuries. But what about his other quirk? Could he do something with that? The thought of his cat quirk suddenly made him feel sick to his stomach, and he threw a hand over his mouth so as not to throw up. It wasn't really his quirk, was it? No, that was something that was stolen and then given to him by All for One. His father. Oh, damn. Izuku had a feeling he was going to need a lot of therapy to deal with that mess. Izuku? What's wrong? It's not mine. The quirk All for One gave me. I mean, I really am quirkless. I've just been using someone else's quirk. Izuku, Nana said sadly. It's okay, Izuku sighed, mostly to himself. It's not like I can give it back, even if I wanted to. It just feels so gross, knowing I've been using someone else's quirk without their permission. Well, at least the person said they didn't want it? Nana tried to cheer him up. According to that bastard, Diagora cut in. He might as well have just said that when in reality he stole it. The man huffed, clear anger and disgust in his voice. Diagoro, you are not helping, Nana scolded. Upon seeing Izuku's crestfallen face, the man grimaced and reeled back. Oh, shit, I didn't. That was. I'm sorry, kid. I'm sure the person wouldn't mind you using it as your own. I guess, Izuku said with a shrug, still not fully convinced. They sat in silence for a while, all of them deep in thought. But then, the silence was broken by Hikage. He cleared his throat. Speaking of that quirk, your new form was pretty interesting, the man offered gently. Oh, yeah. What was that about? That was so cool. Nana gushed, an over-exaggerated smile on her face as she patted his head. Izuku blushed at the praise, and despite still feeling bad, he felt a small smile tug at his lips. Yeah, I don't know what that was, but it was pretty cool, he agreed, smiling bashfully as he remembered the feeling of being that hybrid. It had been a weird experience, still being mostly himself and human, and yet having features and instincts that reflected more of his cat form. Everything had been overwhelming during the fight, and he couldn't remember most of it. But he still remembered the feeling of his body finally being right way very clearly. It almost felt like he finally fit inside his own skin.
Can you do it again?
En asked curiously. At that, Izuku frowned down at the floor. He honestly had no idea how he had even done it in the first place, much less how to do it again. I don't know. I mean, I guess I could try, Izuku said carefully. He tried focusing back on the feeling of being whole, of somehow being both him and Broccoli and fighting side by side. When that didn't work, he tried to remember how it felt to have a tail and claws, trying to focus on the specifics. But nothing happened. Was there some sort of trigger needed for it to activate? It's no use, he sighed, feeling disappointed with himself. Maybe I'm missing something? Like an outside trigger? Maybe, Nana hummed. Well, I'm sure you'll get the hang of it, eventually. She reassured him kindly. Izuku smiled at her and nodded his head. He was just about to answer when there was a sudden knock on the door. All of them tensed when the valve suddenly began to open. And even though no one else could hear them, the vestiges turned deathly quiet as they watched the valve turn. And then there he was. All for one. The villain was still wearing that weird mask, and he was carrying a tray of food?
Ah, I see you're awake,
The man said, almost fondly. He then paused and looked around.
Were you talking to someone in here?
Izuku tensed even more, clutching the sheets beneath him as he shook his head frantically. It didn't seem like the villain knew of the vestiges, and no way was Izuku going to reveal that secret to him. Who knew what he would do to Yoichi if he knew his brother was still around?
I see. Just talking to yourself then? You always had a tendency to do that.
The man huffed. And yeah, that was definitely fondness in his voice. It made Izuku feel sick to his stomach. What what do you want? Izuku asked, unable to keep his voice from shaking.
Can a man not want to spend some time with his son?
All for one answered. If you wanted to spend time with me, then you should have been there years ago. It's a bit too late now. Izuku bit out, anger settling in his chest. It was true, though. The man had his chance to be a father, but he blew it. Izuku didn't need him in his life. Not now or ever.
Don't say that,
All for one said, and though he didn't raise his voice, there was a bite to it that had Izuku flinching back. Sorry, Izuku muttered automatically.
You're fine,
He answered gently, causing Izuku to instinctively relax. He had no idea why his body was reacting like this, or why he even had felt the need to apologize in the first place. There was just something about the man's voice that had his body react on pure instinct.
Now, I brought you some dinner. I'm sure you must be hungry by now.
I'm not hungry, he said, despite the way his stomach was grumbling.
I said, I'm sure you must be hungry,
The man repeated sternly.
I will not have you starve yourself.
Izuku frowned up at the man, before looking away with a huff. The villain sighed and stepped closer, making all of them tense up. Nana even stood up between them, but could do nothing as the man just walked right through her.
Here's what's going to happen,
The man said firmly.
You are going to eat what is given to you, or I will force feed you. It's your choice.
Izuku grimaced at the thought of being fed like a baby. He really didn't want either option. Who knows what the villain might have done to the food? But he also was very hungry. Fine, I'll eat it, Izuku said reluctantly.
Good boy,
The man hummed as he handed him the tray of what appeared to be katsudon. Of course he'd give him what had always been Izuku's favorite food. Izuku had expected him to leave, but instead he sat down on the edge of the bed, much like Nana had done before. The vestiges were all tense as they watched him. Nana and Diagoro both lingered in the room, glaring daggers at the man who had killed them, and Yoichi, who had just managed to calm down, seemed to be on the verge of another panic attack. which really didn't help with Izuku's own anxiety.
Well, are you gonna eat?
Izuku startled back to the present, and he looked down at the food. It really looked like it was just ordinary katsudon, and yet he couldn't trust it not to be tempered with. But he also doubted it was anything deadly, considering how the villain had acted towards him so far. That, plus the lack of danger sense. With a frown, Izuku took the first bite. It didn't taste weird. In fact, it tasted almost exactly like he remembered his mother used to make it. And so, he reluctantly continued to eat, all while the villain watched him. It honestly creeped him out, how the man just kept staring at him, as if to memorize his every move. Are you just gonna keep watching me, or did you want something? Izuku eventually asked between bites, unable to take the silence.
How about we talk?
The man hummed, sounding almost eager about the idea.
How is life for you?
Seriously? Izuku hissed, unable to believe the nerve he had for even asking that after he abandoned him.
Yes, I want to know what I've missed.
The man answered simply. So what? You think you're entitled to my entire life story? At that, All for One didn't answer for a long while. He almost seemed guilty, but no, that couldn't be it.
I want to know what I've missed,
He repeated more softly. Well, too bad, because I'm not telling you. You already know I'm going to UA anyway. Izuku scoffed as he took another bite of the food. It really tasted good.
What about your time before UA? How was school? And when did your quirk manifest? I waited for it to manifest for years without any results before I left. I bet you must have been thrilled when it finally appeared.
You mean the quirk you stole from someone and then forced on me? That quirk? Izuku bit out. He wasn't sure that if he still had his tail, it would be twitching with annoyance. Or he was sure that if he still had his tail, it would be twitching with annoyance.
Yes, that quirk,
All for One said, sounding amused and not at all guilty.
How did it manifest?
Izuku frowned down at his food. He certainly wasn't going to tell him about that story, especially not about the part where a racer had saved him and took him home. He had a feeling that the villain wouldn't like that. It just randomly manifested when I was 12, Izuku mumbled with a shrug, avoiding the villain's eyes. I was really confused at first, but then I eventually learned to live with it.
And the hybrid form?
All for One asked curiously. That's new. He grimaced, hating himself for admitting even that much.
I see. I wonder if it's because of One for All. Past users' quirks got stronger too, thanks to it. Though this is definitely unique,
His father muttered, mostly to himself as he seemed to be deep in thought. The man then paused for another long moment, studying Izuku.
The question is, why have you not broken yet?
He asked quietly, almost too soft for Izuku to pick up. Huh?
Your quirks. I heard the report from Shigaraki and his team. You've been seen using multiple of the past user's quirks at once. That shouldn't be possible. Any ordinary person can only wield one, then they start to break down. And yet, here you are.
Izuku frowned at that, having not exactly thought about that before. You can use multiple quirks, Izuku pointed out.
Indeed I can, All for One chuckled. I guess it is fitting, then, that you would have that ability. I guess you are more like your uncle than I thought.
What do you mean?
Yoichi had an invisible quirk. It let him store and pass on quirks to other people. I think that maybe you have an invisible quirk as well, one that lets you store and use several quirks.
I have a quirk? Izuku asked, unable to help the small spark of hope inside of him.
It appears so, All for One hummed, sounding happy. And what a marvelous quirk it is! Truly a perfect quirk for my successor.
Your what?
I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? All for One chuckled. I understand that it's going to take a while for you to let go of your heroic ideals. But now that you're here, I feel it is only appropriate that you work beside me and learn about the family business.
I thought Shigaraki was your successor, Izuku asked faintly, as he tried to wrap his head around what he just heard. Him? The successor of an evil organization? Why?
Hmm? Oh, that boy. Yes, I suppose in a way he is, though he lacks some finesse. I'm sure, though, that with you by his side, he might learn a thing or two.
Izuku swallowed nervously, not liking how confident the villain sounded. He wished he wasn't wearing that stupid mask, so maybe he could figure out what he was feeling. And how can you be so sure about that? He asked carefully.
Don't think I've forgotten how clever you are, the man said fondly, hand once again reaching out to ruffle Izuku's already messy hair. You used to spend hours writing and babbling about quirks, even at such a young age, and I am sure that passion has only grown, yes? After all, you are my son. It's only natural you would get my intellect and curiosity. I'm nothing like you, Izuku snapped, shaking off the man's hand. Oh, aren't you now? All for One chuckled as he reached over to rustle Izuku's hair again, despite his protests. I'm sure you'll see the truth soon enough. For now, though, you should get some rest. And perhaps take a shower, he said as an afterthought. Clean clothes are in the wardrobe over there.
The man took the tray back and stood up to leave, and Izuku felt a wave of panic wash over him as he realized he was going to be left alone in here again. Oh, wait, Izuku called out, stopping the man in his tracks. Kachan, is Kachan okay? He asked, worried for his friend's safety. After all, he wasn't sure if the other teen was taken or not. He really hoped he wasn't.
Who?
All for One asked, tilting his head in thought, before he seemed to remember.
Oh, that Bakugo Katsuki kid. Yes, he should be fine. For now.
What does that mean? What do you plan to do with him? Izuku asked, voice shaking as he clutched the sheets beneath him.
Not anything that you should concern yourself with, the man answered with a shrug. It was Shigaraki who wanted him. Something about turning him over to our side. I do not care either way. If it doesn't work, his quirk should at least come to good use, he said with a chuckle.
Izuku felt his stomach drop at the implications. Please don't take his quirk, he pleaded.
I will do as I please if he chooses to not cooperate,
All for One told him with a finality to his words.
Now stop worrying about that and get some rest. I will have someone check in on you later.
And with that, the man turned to leave. Izuku glared at the man's back as he left. Part of him really wanted to attack him, but the vestiges told him not even try, and that was enough to convince him it was a bad idea. After the man left, Izuku and the vestiges all let out a deep sigh of relief. That had been awful. He couldn't even begin to imagine how it felt for the vestiges to be so close to their killer. Do you? Izuku whispered hesitantly, trying to get the attention of his headmates. Do you hate me now? Oh, kiddo, no, Nana murmured sadly as she floated over and gave him a hug. He immediately leaned into the touch as tears started welling in his eyes.
We could never hate you, En said quietly, also joining in on the hug.
Even if I'm related to him?
Well, so is Yoichi, and we don't hate him now, do we? Daigoro said with a small grin. That's right. Your blood does not define you, Hikage agreed. So, I guess that makes you my nephew, huh?
Yoichi spoke up, startling all of them. The man had materialized a few feet away, looking nervous as he watched Izuku with uncertain eyes. Yeah, I guess so. Should I start calling you Uncle Yoichi? That gained him a small smile.
Call me whatever you want, kiddo. We already saw you as family anyway. Yeah! We can all be aunts and uncles. It's not fair for Yoichi to get that privilege.
Daigoro cheered, clearly trying to brighten the mood. Izuku felt his legs tug up into a small smile. Despite the awful situation, he was glad that he at least wasn't alone. Sorry to change the subject, Nana said gently, gaining their attention. Nana said gently, gaining their attention. But that man had a point about you maybe taking a shower. I know you hate it, but you're kind of covered in dirt and grime. And blood. So, yeah, a shower might be a good idea. Izuku grimaced at the thought of a shower, but he also didn't enjoy the thought of licking it up in his cat form. So, gritting his teeth, Izuku took the fastest shower of his life. The bathroom also looked exactly how he remembered, but he tried not to think about it as he scrubbed himself clean. After drying himself off, Izuku then headed to the wardrobe where his dad, all for one, said the clean clothes would be. When he opened the closet door, though, he was surprised by what he saw. The clothes weren't bad, per se, but definitely not what he had been expecting. It was all just a bunch of white dress shirts and black slacks, along with black vests and ties. Clearly, All for One wanted him to look fancy, for some strange reason. With nothing else to wear, Izuku gave in and he put on a pair of black slacks and a white dress shirt, skipping the vest and tie. It wasn't the most comfortable, but it definitely beat being naked. Besides, it was probably time for him to change form anyway, so it wasn't like it really mattered what clothes he wore. There were no clocks or electronics in the room, but judging from the tension building inside of him, he figured it was nearing nighttime. He still felt sick thinking about his quirk, but he also knew there wasn't anything he could do about it. The quirk was stuck with him, whether he liked it or not. Before changing, Izuku gave one more try to turn into his hybrid form from before, but to no avail. He was becoming more and more convinced that there was a trigger needed for it to happen. Maybe it only appeared if he truly needed it? Shaking his head, Izuku decided not to try and think about that too much, and instead he took a deep breath and focused on turning into a small cat form. The change was easy, as usual, and in the blink of an eye, Broccoli sat on the bed in his place. The cat stretched out, feeling the tension finally melt away as he was himself again. But there was also a longing to be bigger. Just like Izuku, he had really liked their new hybrid form. It was so much bigger and stronger than both of them, and he had thumbs. That had been amazing, being able to function as a human while still being in semi control. Broccoli sighed, mourning the loss of that form. He tried to cheer himself up with the idea that maybe they'd see it again, but it was still annoying, not being able to control it from the start. With another sigh, Broccoli laid down and tried to get comfortable. Only it wasn't working. He was as far away from comfort as he could get, being in an unknown place and locked away by villains. The room suddenly felt both too big and too small at the same time, and Broccoli didn't even notice he had been hyperventilating until one of the vestiges told him to breathe. Taking in a shaky breath, Broccoli staggered to his feet and leaped off the bed. It was too big and open, leaving him feeling vulnerable to any threats. He tried hiding under the bed, but that too felt too big and open. Nothing felt safe. After some trial and error, where he even tried sleeping inside the closet, he finally got the idea to simply drag the pillows and blankets down from the bed and tuck them beneath it. Once that was done, he crawled as far into the soft pile as he could, with his back against the wall. Finally, Broccoli could feel some of the tension leaving his body, and he let out a soft sigh of relief as he fell into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, Broccoli was woken up to the sound of the valve door opening, and through the door walked none other than Shigaraki. Author's notes. Cookies to everyone who figured out this was Dad for one. Oh man, I've been excited about this for so long, like since the very first chapter. Hopefully it didn't disappoint. Next up, we'll have some brotherly bonding between Shigaraki and Izuku, as well as a glimpse into what's going on with Kachan. Hope you all look forward to it. As always, thank you everyone for your continued patience, comments, and support. Your comments really help motivate me, and I enjoy reading each and every one. Hope you all have a wonderful day. And that's a wrap on chapter 41. I like this chapter a lot. I like I like how sweet All For One is being. I mean, of course he's All For One. I don't like what he's done, but he's at least he's being a kind of good dad. He reminds me of the King of Corona from Rapunzel, but like 200 times less chill. So, if you can't tell, I've been watching Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure recently. Sorry for sounding so tired. It is 4:17 a.m. It's taken me an hour to record this, and I am really, really tired. I hope you guys all enjoyed. Please go show the original author Texiliaz some love, and please leave me a comment. I love, love, love reading your comments. They make me so, so, so happy. Please leave me specifically a hate comment, and I'll shout you out in the next video. Unfortunately, last video there were no hate comments, so nobody for me to shout out. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye, pup.